So tonight we're going to read in the honor of the solar eclipse that just happened today in America. And we're going to read the chapter of the Krsna Book, 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, describing the solar eclipse that happened during Krishna's pastimes and how that was, what happened. I just have to find the right chapter here. We're almost there. We're almost there. Jarasandha has left. Shalva has been delivered. Oh, this may be 3 chapters. You're into it? You're into it? You're into it? Okay. Reading from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prabhupada's summary study of the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is the summa bonum of all Vedic literatures, and the Krsna Book is the summa bonum of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay? Chapter 82, Lord Krishna and Balaram meet the inhabitants of Vrindavan. Once upon a time, while Lord Krishna and Balaram were living peacefully in their great city of Dwarka, there was a rare occasion of a full solar eclipse, such as takes place at the end of every kalpa, or day of Brahma. That's why it's inauspicious. At the end of every kalpa, the sun is covered by a great cloud, and incessant rain covers the lower planetary systems up to Swargaloka. By astronomical calculation, people were informed about this great eclipse prior to its taking place, and therefore everyone, both men and women, decided to assemble at the holy place in Kurukshetra, known as Samanta Panchaka. The Samanta Panchaka pilgrimage site is celebrated because Lord Parashuram performed great sacrifices there after killing all the Kshatriyas in the world 21 times. So you need him now. Anyway, when Lord Parashuram killed all the Kshatriyas, their accumulated blood flowed like a stream. Lord Parashuram dug 5 big lakes at Samanta Panchaka and filled them with this blood. Lord Parashuram is Vishnu Tattva. As stated in the Ishopanishad, Vishnu Tattva cannot be contaminated by any sinful activity. Yet although Lord Parashuram is fully powerful and uncontaminated, in order to exhibit ideal character, he performed great sacrifices at Samanta Panchaka to atone for his so-called sinful killing of the Kshatriyas. By his example, Lord Parashuram established that the killing art, which although sometimes necessary, is not good. Lord Parashuram considered himself culpable for the sinful killing of the Kshatriyas. Therefore, how much more culpable are we for such abominable, unsanctioned acts? Thus, from time immemorial, the killing of living entities is prohibited all over the world. Taking advantage of the occasion of the solar eclipse, all important persons from all parts of Bharatavarsha visited the holy place of pilgrimage. Some of the important personalities are mentioned as follows. Among the elderly persons were Akrura, Vasudev, and Ugrasena. And among the younger generation were Gada, Pradyumna, Samba, and many other members of the Yadu dynasty who had come there with a view to atone for sinful activities accrued in the course of discharging their respective duties. Because almost all the members of the Yadu dynasty went to Kurukshetra, some important personalities like Aniruddha, the son of Pradyumna, and Kritavarma, the commander-in-chief of the Yadu dynasty, along with Suchandra, Shuka, and Sarana, remained at Dwarka to protect the city. All the members of the Yadu dynasty were naturally very beautiful, Yet on this occasion, when they appeared duly decorated with gold necklaces and flower garlands, dressed in valuable clothing, and properly armed with their respective weapons, their natural beauty and personalities were 100 times enhanced. The members of the Yadu dynasty came to Kurukshetra in their gorgeously decorated chariots, which resembled the airplanes of the demigods, and which were pulled by big horses that moved like the waves of the ocean. Some Yadus rode on sturdy, stalwart elephants that moved like the clouds in the sky. Their wives were carried on beautiful palanquins by beautiful men whose features resembled that of Vidyadharas. The entire assembly looked as beautiful as an assembly of the demigods in heaven. After arriving in Kurukshetra, the members of the Yadu dynasty took their baths ceremoniously with self-control as enjoined in the Shastras, and they observed fasting for the whole period of the eclipse in order to nullify the reactions of their sinful activities. Since it is a Vedic custom to give in charity as much as possible during the hours of the eclipse, the members of the Yadu dynasty distributed many hundreds of cows in charity to the Brahmanas. All those cows were fully decorated with nice dress and ornaments. The special feature of these cows was that they had golden ankle bells and flower garlands on their necks. After the eclipse, all the members of the Yadu dynasty again took their baths in the lakes created by Lord Parashuram. Then they sumptuously fed the Brahmanas with first-class cooked food, all prepared in butter. According to the Vedic system, there are two classes of food. One is called raw food, and the other is called cooked food. Raw food does not indicate raw vegetables and raw grains, but food boiled in water. Whereas cooked food is made in ghee. Chapatis, dal, rice, and ordinary vegetables were called raw food, as are fruits and salads. But puris, chikoris, samosas, sweet balls, and so on are called cooked foods. All the Brahmanas invited on that occasion by the members of the Yadu dynasty were fed sumptuously with cooked food. Ceremonial functions performed by the members of the Yadu dynasty externally resemble the ritualistic ceremonies performed by the karmis. When a karmi performs some ritualistic ceremony, his ambition is sense gratification, good position, good wife, good house, good children, or good wealth. But the ambition of the members of the Yadu dynasty was different. Their ambition was to offer Krishna perpetual devotion with faith. All the members of the Yadu dynasty were great devotees. As such, after many births of accumulated pious activities, they were given the chance to associate with Krishna, with Lord Krishna. In going to take their baths in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, in observing the regulator principles during the solar eclipse, or in feeding the Brahmanas, in all their activities, they simply thought of devotion to Krishna. Their ideal worshipable Lord was Krishna, and no one else. After the Brahmanas are fed, it is the custom for the host, with their permission, to accept prasadam. Thus, with the permission of the Brahmanas, all the members of the Yadu dynasty took lunch. Then they selected resting places underneath big shady trees, and when they had taken sufficient rest, they prepared to receive visitors, among whom were relatives and friends, as well as many subordinate kings and rulers. There were the rulers of Matsya province, Ushinara province, Koshala province, Vidarbha province, Kuru province, Srinjaya province, Kamboja province, Kekaya province, Madras province, Kunti province, Anartha province, Kerala province, and many other countries and provinces. Some of the rulers belonged to opposing parties, and some were friends. But above all, the visitors from Vrindavan were most prominent. The residents of Vrindavan, headed by Nanda Maharaj, had been living in great anxiety because of separation from Krishna and Balaram. Taking advantage of the solar eclipse, they all came to see their life and soul, Krishna and Balaram. The inhabitants of Vrindavan were all well-wishers and intimate friends of the Yadu dynasty. This meeting of the two parties after long separation was a very touching incident. All the Yadus and the residents of Vrindavan felt such great pleasure in meeting, talking together, that it was a unique scene. Meeting after long separation, they were all jubilant. Their hearts throbbed, and their faces appeared like freshly bloomed lotus flowers. Drops of tears fell from their eyes. The hair on their bodies stood on end, and because of their extreme ecstasy, they were temporarily speechless. In other words, they dove into the ocean of happiness. While the men were meeting in that way, the women also met one another in the same manner. They embraced one another in great friendship, smiling very mildly, and looked at one another with much affection. When they were embracing one another in their arms, the saffron and kumkum spread on their breasts were exchanged from one person to another, and they all felt heavenly ecstasy. Due to such heart-to-heart embracing, torrents of tears glided down their cheeks. The juniors were offering obeisances to the elders, and the elders were offering their blessings to the juniors. Thus they welcomed one another and asked after one another's welfare. Ultimately, however, all their talk was only of Krishna. All the neighbors and relatives were connected with Lord Krishna's pastimes in this world, and as such, Krishna was the center of all their activities. Whatever activities they performed, social, political, religious, or conventional, were transcendental. I made one comment on this, that there are devotees who think that once you've attained Vrindavan, that you don't want to go anywhere else, you don't want to talk about anything else, and like that. But here we have the residents of Dwarka and the residents of Vrindavan. When they meet together, what happens? Dwarka, it was complete loving ecstasy. So in this way, these books teach us how to be devotees, pure devotees, associates of Krishna. So we should all learn to share these feelings with one another as family members of Krishna. The real elevation, I'm reading now, the real elevation of human life rests on knowledge and renunciation. As stated in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, devotional service rendered to Krishna automatically produces perfect knowledge and renunciation. The family members of the Yadu dynasty and the cowherds of Vrindavan had their minds fixed on Krishna. That is the symptom of perfect knowledge. And because their minds were always engaged in Krishna, they were automatically freed from all material activities. This stage of life is called Yukta Vairagya by Srila Rupa Goswami. Knowledge and renunciation, therefore, do not mean dry speculation and renunciation of activities. Rather, one must start speaking and acting only in relationship with Krishna. In this meeting at Kurukshetra, Kunti Devi and Vasudeva, who were sister and brother, met after a long separation, along with their respective sons and daughters-in-law, children, and other family members. By talking among themselves, they soon forgot all their past miseries. Kunti Devi especially addressed her brother Vasudeva as follows: "My dear brother, I am very unfortunate because not one of my desires has ever been fulfilled. Otherwise, how could it happen that although I have such a saintly brother as you, perfect in all respects, you did not inquire from me as to how I was passing my days in a distressed condition of life?" It appears that Kunti Devi was remembering the miserable days when she had been banished with her sons. It appears that Kunti Devi was remembering the miserable days when she had been banished with her sons through the mischievous plans of Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. She continued, "My dear brother, I can understand that when province goes against someone, even one's nearest relatives forget him. In such a condition, even one's father, one's mother, or one's own children will forget him. Therefore, my dear brother, I do not accuse you." Vasudeva replied to his sister, "My dear sister, do not be sorry. Do not blame me in that way. We should always remember that we are all only toys in the hand of Providence. Everyone is under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is under His control only that all kinds of fruitive actions and their reactions take place. My dear sister, you know that we were very much harassed by King Kamsa, and by his persecutions we were scattered here and there. We were always full of anxieties. Only in the last few days have we returned to our own places by the grace of God." After this conversation, Vasudeva and Ugrasena received the kings who came to see them, and they warmly welcomed them all. Seeing Lord Krishna present on the spot, all the visitors felt transcendental pleasure and became very peaceful. Some of the prominent visitors were as follows: Bhishma Dev, Dronacharya, Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana, Gandhari, along with their sons, King Yudhishthir along with his wife, and the Pandavas along with Kunti, as well as Sanjaya, Vidura, Kripacharya, Kunti Bhoja, Virata, Bhishmaka, King Nagnajit, Purujit, Drupada, Shalya, Drishtaketu, the son of Kashi, the king of Kashi, Damagosh, Vishalaksha, the king of Patila, the king of Madras, formerly known as Madra, the king of Kekaya, Yudamanyu, Shusharma, Bhalika, along with his sons, and many other rulers subordinate to King Yudhishthir. Yes,
So,
Krishna Chaitanya has something to say.
so this marks, at least in, chronologically, this was before the Battle of Kurukshetra.
Yes,
Because all these personalities are
Yes.
still alive.
yes.
Okay.
As was the Rajasuya sacrifice of Maharaj Yudhishthir.
Right.
That was one of the, times when the enmity was brought to a boiling point. And finally, when after the Rajasuya sacrifice, Duryodhana fell in the water in their palace because it was constructed so wonderfully that if you didn't really know where you were going and what you were doing, you would mistake the floor for water, and you mistook the floor and fell in, and everybody started to laugh, all the ladies especially. And Krishna just acted in such a way as to not stop them from doing it. And Duryodhana he went out of there fuming. When the visitors saw Lord Krishna with his thousands of queens, they were fully satisfied at the sight of such beauty and transcendental opulence. All who were there personally visited Lord Balaram and Krishna, and being properly welcomed by them, they began to glorify the members of the Yadu dynasty, especially Krishna and Balaram. Because Ugrasena was the king of the Bhojas, he was considered the chief Yadu, and therefore the visitors specifically addressed him, "Your Majesty Ugrasena, king of the Bhojas, factually, the Yadus are the only persons within this world who are perfect in all respects. All glories unto you. All glories unto you. The specific condition of your perfection is that you always see Lord Krishna, who is sought by many mystic yogis, undergoing severe austerities and penances for a great number of years. All of you are in direct touch with Lord Krishna at every moment. All the Vedic hymns glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. The Ganges water is considered considered sanctified because of its being the water used to wash the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. The Vedic scriptures are nothing but the injunctions of Lord Krishna. The purpose of the study of all the Vedas is to know Krishna. Therefore, the words of Krishna and the message of his pastimes are always purified. By the influence of time and circumstances, all the opulences of this world were almost completely wiped out. But since Krishna has appeared on this planet, all auspicious features have again reappeared due to the touch of his lotus feet. Because of his presence, all our ambitions and desires are gradually being fulfilled. Your Majesty, King of the Bhojas, you are related with the Yadu dynasty by matrimonial relationship and by blood relationship also. As a result, you are constantly associating with Lord Krishna, and you have no difficulty in seeing him or touching him at any time. Lord Krishna moves with you, talks with you, sits with you, rests with you, and dines with you. The Yadus appear to be always engaged in worldly affairs, which are considered to be the royal road to hell. But due to the presence of Lord Krishna, the original personality of Godhead in the Vishnu category, who is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent, all of you are factually relieved from all material contamination and are situated in the transcendental position of liberation and Brahman existence. When Nanda Maharaj and the other residents of Vrindavan had heard that Krishna would be present at Kurukshetra because of the solar eclipse, and that all the members of the Yadu dynasty would also be there, they had immediately prepared to go there. King Nanda, accompanied by his cowherd men, had loaded all their necessary paraphernalia on bullock carts, and all of the Vrindavan residents had come to Kurukshetra to see their beloved sons, Lord Balaram and Lord Krishna. When the cowherd men of Vrindavan arrived in Kurukshetra, all the members of the Yadu dynasty were most pleased. As soon as they saw the residents of Vrindavan, they stood up to welcome them and appeared to have regained their life. All the Yadus and Vrindavan residents had been very eager to meet, and when they actually came forward and met, they embraced one another to their heart's satisfaction and remained in embrace for a considerable time. As soon as Vasudeva saw Nanda Maharaj, Vasudeva jumped up and ran over to him and embraced him very affectionately. Vasudeva began to narrate his own history, his own past history, and how he had been imprisoned by King Kamsa, how his babies had been killed, how immediately after Krishna's birth he had carried Krishna to the place of Nanda Maharaj, and how Krishna and Balaram had been raised by Nanda Maharaj and his queen Yashoda as their own children. Similarly, Lord Balaram and Krishna also embraced King Nanda and Mother Yashoda, and then they offered their respects under their lotus feet by bowing down. Because of their feeling affection for Nanda and Yashoda, Lord Krishna and Balaram became choked up, and for a few seconds they could not speak. The most fortunate King Nanda and Mother Yashoda placed their sons on their laps and began to embrace them to their full satisfaction. Because of separation from Krishna and Balaram, King Nanda and Yashoda had been merged in great distress for a very long time. Now, after meeting them and embracing them, all their sufferings were mitigated. After this, Krishna's mother, Devaki, and Balaram's mother, Rohini, both embraced Mother Yashoda, and they said, "Dear Queen Yashoda, Devi, you and Nanda Maharaj have been great friends to us, and when we remember you, we are immediately overwhelmed by the thought of your friendly activities. We are so indebted to you that even if we were to return your benediction by giving you the opulence of the King of Heaven, it would not be enough to repay you for your friendly behavior. We shall never forget your kindly behavior toward us. When Krishna and Balaram were born, before they even saw their real father and mother, they were entrusted to your care, and you raised them as your own children. fostering them as birds take care of their offspring in the nests. You have nicely fed, nourished, and loved them, and have performed many auspicious religious ceremonies for their benefit. Actually, they are not our sons. They belong to you. Nanda Maharaj and you are the real father and mother of Krishna and Balaram. As long as they were under your care, they had not even a pinch of difficulty. Under your protection, they were completely out of the way of all kinds of fear. And demons were coming daily. This most affectionate care which you have taken for them is completely befitting your elevated position. The most noble personalities do not discriminate between their own sons and the sons of others. I'll read that again. The most noble personalities do not discriminate between their own sons and the sons of others. And there cannot be any personalities more noble than Nanda Maharaj and you. As far as the gopis of Vrindavan were concerned, from the very beginning of their lives, they did not know anything beyond Krishna. Krishna and Balaram were their life and soul. The gopis were so attached to Krishna that they could not tolerate not seeing him, even momentarily, when their eyelids blinked and impeded their vision. They condemned Lord Balaram, the creator of the body, because he foolishly made eyelids which blinked and checked their seeing Krishna. Because they had been separated from Krishna for so many years, the gopis, having come along with Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda, felt intense ecstasy upon seeing Krishna. No one can even imagine how eager the gopis were to see Krishna again. As soon as Krishna became visible to them, they took him inside their hearts, through their eyes, and embraced him to their full satisfaction. Even though they were embracing Krishna only mentally, they became so ecstatic and overwhelmed with joy that for the time being they completely forgot themselves. The ecstatic trance they achieved simply by mentally embracing Krishna is impossible to achieve even for great yogis constantly engaged in meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna could understand that the gopis were wrapped in ecstasy by his embracing them in their minds, and therefore, since he was present in everyone's heart, he reciprocated the embracing from within. Krishna was sitting with Mother Yashoda and his other mothers, Devaki and Rohini. But when the mothers engaged in talking, he took the opportunity and went to a secluded place to meet the gopis. As soon as he approached the gopis, the Lord smiled, and after embracing them and inquiring about their welfare, he began to encourage them, saying, "My dear friends, you know that Lord Balaram and I left Vrindavan just to please our relatives and family members. Thus we were long engaged in fighting with our enemies and were obliged to forget you, who were so much attached to me, in love and affection. I can understand that I have been ungrateful to you, but still I know that you are faithful to me. May I inquire if you have been thinking of us, although we had to leave you behind? My dear gopis, do you now dislike remembering me, considering me to have been ungrateful to you? Do you still take my misbehavior with you very seriously? After all, you should know that it was not my intention to leave you. Our separation was ordained by Providence, who after all is the supreme controller and does as he desires. He causes the intermingling of different persons and again disperses them as he desires. Sometimes we see that a strong wind will mingle together clouds, atomic particles of dust, and broken pieces of cotton. And after the strong wind subsides, all the clouds, particles of dust, and pieces of cotton are again separated, scattered in different places. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the creator of everything. The objects we see are different manifestations of his energy. By his supreme will, we are sometimes united and sometimes separated. We can therefore conclude that ultimately we are absolutely dependent on His will. Fortunately, you have developed loving affection for me, which is the only way to achieve the transcendental position of association with me. Should I read that again? Thank you. Fortunately, you have developed loving affection for me, which is the only way to achieve the transcendental position of association with me. Any living entity who develops such unalloyed devotional affection for me certainly at the end goes back to home, back to Godhead. In other words, unalloyed devotional service and affection for me are the cause of supreme liberation. My dear Gopi friends, you may know from me that it is my energies only which are acting everywhere. Take, for example, an earthen pot. It is nothing but a combination of earth, water, fire, air, and sky. It is always of the same physical composition, whether in its beginning, during its existence, or after its annihilation. When it is created, the earthen pot is made of earth, water, fire, air, and sky. While it remains, it is the same in composition, and when it is broken and annihilated, its different ingredients are conserved in different parts of the material energy. Similarly, at the creation of this cosmic manifestation, during its maintenance and after its dissolution, everything is but a different manifestation of my energy. And because the energy is not separate from me, it is to be concluded that I am existing in everything. In the same way, the body of a living being is nothing but a composition of the 5 elements, and the living entity embodied in the material condition is also part and parcel of me. The living entity is imprisoned in the material condition on account of his false conception of himself as the supreme enjoyer. This false ego of the living entity is the cause of his imprisonment in material existence. As the supreme absolute truth, I am transcendental to the living entity as well as to his material embodiment. The 2 energies, material and spiritual, as well as the 2 energies, material and spiritual, both act under my supreme control. My dear gopis, I request that instead of being afflicted, you try to accept everything with a philosophical attitude. Then you will understand that you are always with me and that there is no cause of lamentation in our being separated from one another. This important instruction by Lord Krishna to the gopis can be utilized by all devotees engaged in Krishna consciousness. The whole philosophy is considered on the basis of inconceivable, simultaneous oneness and difference. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that He is present everywhere in His impersonal feature. Everything exists in Him, but still He is not personally present everywhere. The cosmic manifestation is nothing but its display of Krishna's energy. And because the energy is not different from the energetic, nothing is different from Krishna. When this absolute consciousness, Krishna consciousness, is absent, we are separated from Krishna. But fortunately, if this Krishna consciousness is present, then we are not separated from Krishna. The process of devotional service is the revival of Krishna consciousness. And if the devotee is fortunate enough to understand that the material energy is not separate from Krishna, then he can utilize the material energy and its products in the service of the Lord. But in the absence of Krishna consciousness, the forgetful living entity, although part and parcel of Krishna, falsely puts himself in the position of the enjoyer of the material world, and being thus implicated in material entanglement, is forced by the material energy to continue his material existence. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Although a living entity is forced to act by the material energy, he falsely thinks that he is the all-in-all and the supreme enjoyer. If the devotee knows perfectly that the Archa Vigraha, or deity form of Lord Krishna in the temple is exactly the same, Satchit Ananda Vigraha, as Krishna himself, then his service to the temple deity becomes direct service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, the temple itself, the temple paraphernalia, and the food offered to the deity are also not separate from Krishna. One has to follow the rules and regulations prescribed by the acharyas, and thus, under superior guidance, Krishna realization is fully possible, even in this material existence. The gopis, having been instructed by Krishna in this philosophy of simultaneous oneness and difference, remained always in Krishna consciousness, and thus became liberated from all material contamination. The consciousness of the living entity who falsely presents himself as the enjoyer of the material world is called jiva kosha, which means imprisonment by the false ego. Not only the gopis, but anyone who follows these instructions of Krishna is immediately freed from the jiva kosha imprisonment. A person in full Krishna consciousness is always liberated from false egoism. He utilizes everything for Krishna's service and is not at any time separated from Krishna. The gopis therefore prayed to Krishna, "Dear Krishna, from your navel emanated the original lotus flower, which is the birthplace of Brahma, the Creator. No one can estimate your glories or your opulence, which therefore remain always a mystery, even to the highest thoughtful men, the masters of all yogic power. However, the conditioned soul, fallen in the dark well of this material existence, can very easily take shelter of your lotus feet. Thus his deliverance is guaranteed." The gopis continued, "Dear Krishna, we are always busy in our family affairs. We therefore request that you remain within our hearts as the rising sun. That will be your greatest benediction." The gopis are always liberated souls because they are fully in Krishna consciousness. They only pretended to be entangled in household affairs in Vrindavan. Because of their separation from Krishna, he might have asked them to return with him to his capital city Dwarka, but the inhabitants of Vrindavan, the gopis, were not interested in the idea of going with Krishna to Dwarka. They wanted to remain busy in Vrindavan and thus feel the presence of Krishna in every step of their lives. They immediately invited Krishna to come back to Vrindavan. This transcendental emotional existence of the gopis is the basic principle of Lord Chaitanya's teaching. The Rath Yatra festival observed by Lord Chaitanya is the emotional process of taking Krishna back to Vrindavan. Srimati Radharani refused to go with Krishna to Dwarka to enjoy his company in the atmosphere of royal opulence, for she wanted to enjoy his company in the original Vrindavan atmosphere. And the gopis, Lord Krishna, being profoundly attached to the gopis, never goes away from Vrindavan, and the gopis and other residents of Vrindavan remain fully satisfied in Krishna consciousness. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 82nd chapter of Krishna. Lord Krishna and Balaram meet the inhabitants of Vrindavan. Chapter 83, Draupadi meets the queens of Krishna. There were many visitors who came to see Krishna, and among them were the Pandavas, headed by King Yudhishthira. After talking with the gopis and bestowing upon them the greatest benediction, Lord Krishna welcomed King Yudhishthira and other relatives who had come to see him. He first of all inquired from them whether their situation was auspicious. Actually, there is no question of ill fortune for anyone who sees the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Yet when Lord Krishna, as a matter of etiquette, inquired from King Yudhishthira about his welfare, the king became very happy by such a reception and addressed the Lord thus: "My dear Lord Krishna, Great personalities and devotees in full Krishna consciousness always think of your lotus feet and remain fully satisfied by drinking the nectar of transcendental bliss. The nectar which they constantly drink sometimes comes out of their mouths and is sprinkled on others as the narration of your transcendental activities. I think I'll repeat that one. My dear Lord Krishna, great personalities and devotees in full Krishna consciousness always think of your lotus feet and remain fully satisfied by drinking the nectar of transcendental bliss. The nectar which they constantly drink sometimes comes out of their mouths and is sprinkled on others as their narration of your transcendental activities. This nectar coming from the mouth of a devotee is so powerful that if one is fortunate enough to have the opportunity to drink it, he is immediately freed from the continuous journey of birth and death. Our material existence is caused by our forgetfulness of your personality. But fortunately, the darkness of forgetfulness is immediately dissipated if one is privileged to hear about your glories.
Is this
Yudhishthira to Krishna. Therefore, my dear Lord, where is the possibility of ill fortune for one who is constantly engaged in hearing your glorious activities? Since we are fully surrendered unto you and have no other shelter than your lotus feet, we are always confident of our good fortune. My dear Lord, you are the ocean of unlimited knowledge and transcendental bliss. The reactions of mental concoctions in the three phases of material life, wakefulness, sleep, and deep sleep, cannot exist in Krishna consciousness. All such reactions are invalidated by the practice of Krishna consciousness. You are the ultimate destination of all liberated persons. Out of your independent will only, you have descended to this earth by the use of your own internal potency, Yogamaya, and to re-establish the Vedic principles of life, you have appeared just like an ordinary human being. Since you are the Supreme Person, there cannot be any ill luck for one who has fully surrendered unto you. When Lord Krishna was busy meeting various kinds of visitors, and while they were engaged in offering prayers to the Lord, the female members of the Kuru dynasty and the Yadu dynasty took the opportunity to meet with one another and engage in talk of Lord Krishna's transcendental pastimes. The first inquiry was made by Draupadi to the wives of Lord Krishna. She addressed them, my dear Rukmini, Bhadra, Jambavati, Satya, Satyabhama, Kalindi, Shaibya, Mitravinda, Lakshmana, Rohini, and all other wives of Lord Krishna. Will you please let us know how Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, accepted you as his wife and married you, pursuant to the marriage ceremonies of ordinary human beings? To this question, the chief of the queens, Rukmini Devi, replied, my dear Draupadi, it was practically a settled fact that the princes like Jarasandha wanted to marry me. Excuse me. My dear Draupadi, it was practically a settled fact that princes like Jarasandha wanted me to marry King Shishupal. And as is usual, all the princes present during the marriage ceremony were prepared with their armor and weapons to fight with any rival who dared to stop the marriage. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead kidnapped me the way a lion takes away a lamb from the flock. This was not, however, a very wondrous act for Lord Krishna, because anyone who claims to be a great hero or king within this world is subordinate to the lotus feet of the Lord. All kings touch their helmets to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. My dear Draupadi, it is my eternal desire that life after life I can be engaged in the service of Lord Krishna, who is the reservoir of all pleasure and beauty. This is my only desire and ambition in life. So there you go. If all the kings of this planet, all the presidents, all the prime ministers, all the leaders would come and put their heads at the lotus feet of Krishna. All these so-called problems would be finished. Self-concocted duties, self-concocted rules, they'd all be finished. Then the whole world would be happy. Prabhupada wasn't exaggerating when he used to say that to us. It's the fact. So if we want to do anything else but what we're doing here right now, and trying our best to bring others in to this understanding, simply this understanding and the conception of it, even if we haven't fully realized it, is enough to relieve us of so many difficulties and so many anxieties and sufferings. After this, Satyabhama began to speak. She said, "My dear Draupadi, my father was very much afflicted by the death of his brother, Prasenna, and he falsely accused Lord Krishna of killing his brother and stealing the Samantyaka jewel, which had actually been taken by Jambavan. Lord Krishna, in order to establish his pure character, fought with Jambavan and rescued the Samantyaka jewel, which he later delivered to my father. My father was very much ashamed, sorry for accusing Lord Krishna of his brother's death. After getting back the Samantyaka jewel, he thought it wise to rectify his mistake. So although he had promised others my hand in marriage, he submitted the jewel and me at the lotus feet of Krishna, and thus I was accepted as his maidservant and wife."
Jambavati?
Jambavati.
This is Jambavati.
Yeah. No, this is Satyabhama.
Satyabhama.
Krishna gave the Samantyaka jewel and Satyabhama to Krishna in order to pacify his mind and heart from having been, what's the word? For having lost his reputation or been talked about badly by the people in general because of Satyabhama's father's spreading rumors.
Hearsay?
Huh?
Hearsay? Hearsay about it?
Hearsay? Yeah, that's also a good word. Defame is a very good word. Very good. After this, Jambavati replied to Draupadi's question. She said, "My dear Draupadi, when Lord Krishna attacked my father, Jambavan, the king of the Rikshas, my father did not know that Lord Krishna was his former master, Lord Ramachandra, the husband of Sita. Not knowing the identity of Lord Krishna, my father fought with him continuously for 27 days. After this period, when he became fatigued, he could understand that since no one but Lord Ramachandra could defeat him, his opponent, Lord Krishna, must be the same Lord Ramachandra. He thus came to his senses and immediately returned the Samantyaka jewel. Furthermore, to satisfy the Lord, he presented me to him to become his wife. In this way I was married to the Lord, and thus my desire to be a servant of Krishna life after life was fulfilled." It wasn't just a fluke. After this, Kalindi said, "My dear Draupadi, I was engaged in great austerities and penances to get Lord Krishna as my husband. When he became aware of this fact, he very kindly came to me with his friend Arjuna and accepted me as his wife. Lord Krishna then took me away from the bank of the Jamuna, and since then I have been engaged in the house of Lord Krishna as a sweeper." Everyone's trying to get to the top of the yoga ladder. And she wanted to be the sweeper. Yeah, correct. And the Lord is treating me as his wife. After this, Mitravinda said, "My dear Draupadi, there was a great assembly of princes at my Swayamvara ceremony, the personal selection of a husband. Lord Krishna was also present in that meeting, and he accepted me as his maidservant by defeating all the princes there. He immediately took me away to Dwarka, exactly as a lion takes its prey from a pack of dogs. When I was thus taken away by Lord Krishna, my brothers wanted to fight him, and later they were defeated. Thus my desire to become the maidservant of Krishna life after life was fulfilled. After this, Satya addressed Draupadi in this way. My dear Draupadi, my father arranged for an assembly for my Swayamvara, and to test the strength and heroism of the prospective bridegrooms, he stipulated that they each fight with his 7 ferocious bulls, which had long, sharp horns. Many heroic prospects tried to defeat the bulls, but unfortunately they were all severely struck, and they returned to their homes as defeated invalids. When Lord Sri Krishna came and fought with the bulls, they were just like playthings for him. He captured the bulls and roped each one of them by the nostrils. Thus they came under his control, just as a goat's small kids become very easily under the control of children. My father was very much pleased and married me to Lord Krishna with great pomp, giving as my dowry many divisions of soldiers, horses, chariots, and elephants, along with hundreds of maidservants. Thus Lord Krishna brought me to his capital city, Dwarka. On the way back, he was assaulted by many princes, but Lord Krishna defeated all of them, and thus I have the privilege of serving his lotus feet as a maidservant. After this, Bhadra began to speak. She said, my dear Draupadi, Lord Krishna is the son of my maternal uncle. Cousins. They were cousins. Fortunately, I became attracted to his lotus feet. When my father understood these feelings of mine, he personally arranged for my marriage, inviting Lord Krishna to marry me and giving him in dowry 1 Akshohini, or division of armed forces, along with many maidservants and other royal paraphernalia. I do not know whether I shall be able to have the shelter of Lord Krishna life after life, but still I pray to the Lord that wherever I may take my birth, I may not forget my relationship with his lotus feet. Then Lakshmana said, my dear queen, many times I heard the great sage Narada glorifying the pastimes of Lord Krishna. I became attracted to the lotus feet of Krishna when I heard Narada say that the goddess of fortune Lakshmi was attracted to his lotus feet. Since then I have always been thinking of him, and thus my attraction for him has increased. My dear queen, my father was very affectionate toward me. When he understood that I was attracted to Krishna, he devised a plan. He devised a plan like that devised by your father. During the Swayamvara, the prospective bridegrooms had to pierce the eyes of a fish with their arrows. The difference between the competition in your Swayamvara and mine was that in yours, the fish was hanging openly on the ceiling in clear view. But in mine, the fish was covered and could be seen only by its reflection in a pot of water. That was the special feature of my Swayamvara. The news of this device spread all over the world, and when the princes heard of it, they arrived at my father's capital city from all directions, fully equipped with armor and guided by their military instructors. Each of them desired to win me as his wife, and one after another, they raised the bow and arrow left for piercing the fish. Many could not even join the bowstring to the 2 ends of the bow, and without attempting to pierce the fish, they simply left the bow as it was and went away. Some, with great difficulty, drew the string from one end to the other, but being unable to tie the other end, they were suddenly knocked down by the spring-like bow. My dear queen, you will be surprised to know that at my Swayamvara meeting, there were many famous kings and heroes present. Heroes like Jarasandha, Ambashta, Shishupal, Bhimasen, Duryodhana, and Karna were, of course, able to string the bow, but they could not pierce the fish because it was covered and they could not trace it out from the reflection. The celebrated hero of the Pandavas, Arjuna, was able to see the reflection of the fish on the water, but although with great care he traced out the location of the fish and shot an arrow, he did not pierce the fish in the right spot, but his arrow at least touched the fish, and so he proved himself better than all the other princes. All the princes who tried to pierce the target were disappointed, being baffled in their attempts. And some candidates even left the place without making an attempt. But when at last Krishna took up the bow, he was able to string the bowstring very easily, just as a child plays with a toy. He placed the arrow and looked only once at the reflection of the fish in the water. He shot the arrow and pierced the fish, and the pierced fish immediately fell down. This victory of Lord Krishna was accomplished at noon during a moment called Abhijit, which is astronomically calculated as auspicious. At that time, the vibration of Jai, Jai was heard all over the world, and from the sky came sounds of drums beaten by the denizens of heaven. Great demigods were overwhelmed with joy and showered flowers on the earth. At that time, I entered the arena of competition, and the ankle bells on my legs sounded very melodious as I walked. I was nicely dressed with new silken garments, flowers decorated my hair, and because of Lord Krishna's victory, I was in ecstatic joy and smiling very pleasingly. I carried in my hands a golden necklace bedecked with jewels, which glittered at intervals. My curling hair encircled my face, which shone with a bright luster due to the reflection of my various earrings. My eyes blinking, I first observed all the princes present. And when I reached my lord, I very slowly placed the golden necklace on his neck. As I have already informed you from the very beginning, my mind was attracted by Lord Krishna, and thus I considered the garlanding of the Lord my great victory. As soon as I placed my garland on the neck of the Lord, there sounded immediately the combined vibration of mridangas, pataha, and anaka, drums, conch shells, kettle drums, and other instruments, causing a tumultuous sound. And while the music played, expert male and female dancers began to dance, and singers began to sing sweetly. My dear Draupadi, when I accepted Lord Krishna as my worshipable husband, and he accepted me as his maidservant, there was a tumultuous roaring among the disappointed princes. All of them were very agitated because of their lusty desires. But without caring for them, my husband, in his form as the four-handed Narayan, immediately took me on his chariot, which was drawn by 4 excellent horses. Expecting opposition from the princes, he armored himself and took up his bow named Shanka. And then our celebrated driver, Dwaraka, drove the beautiful chariot without a moment's delay toward the city of Dwarka. Thus, in the presence of all the princes, I was carried away very quickly, exactly as a deer is carried away from the flock by a lion. Some of the princes, however, wanted to check our progress, and thus, equipped with proper weapons, they opposed us, just as dogs try to oppose the progressive march of a lion. At that time, due to the arrows released by the Shanga bow of Lord Krishna, some of the princes lost their hands, some of them lost their legs, and some of them lost their heads and their lives. The others and others fled from the battlefield. The Supreme Personality of Godhead then entered the most celebrated city of the universe, Dwarka. And he entered the city, and as he entered the city, he appeared like the shining sun. The whole city of Dwarka was profusely decorated on that occasion. There were so many flags and festoons and gates all over Dwarka that the sunshine could not even enter the city. I have already told you that my father was very affectionate to me. So when he saw that my desire had been fulfilled by my getting Lord Krishna as my husband, in great happiness he began to distribute to friends and relatives various kinds of gifts, such as valuable garments, ornaments, bedsteads, and sitting carpets. Lord Krishna is always self-sufficient, yet my father, out of his own accord, offered my husband a dowry consisting of riches, soldiers, elephants, chariots, horses, and many rare and valuable weapons. He presented all these to the Lord with great enthusiasm. My dear Queen, at that time, I could guess that in my previous life I must have performed some wonderful pious activity, and as a result, I can in this life be one of the maidservants in the house of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When all the principal queens of Lord Krishna had finished their statements, Rohini, as the representative of the other 16,000 queens, began to narrate the incident of the becoming wives of Krishna. My dear Queen, when Bhaumasura was conquering all the world, he collected wherever possible all the beautiful daughters of the kings and kept us arrested within his palace. When news of our imprisonment reached Lord Krishna, he fought with Bhaumasura and released us. Lord Krishna killed Bhaumasura and all his soldiers, and although he had no need to accept even one wife, he nevertheless, by our request, married all 16,000 of us. My dear Queen, our only qualification was that we were always thinking of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Seems like there's a pattern here. It seems like all we have to do is think of Lord Krishna in love all the time. And whatever your desire, whatever relationship you want with Krishna will be fulfilled. Not that we have to be mental about everything, and wonder about this and wonder about that, how to do this, how to do that, how to avoid this, how to avoid that. All we have to do is think of Krishna and love. And that doesn't mean we stop our duties. We can still do our duties. Practically everyone's thinking of something at every moment. My dear Queen Draupadi, please take it from us that we were not after any opulence such as a kingdom, an empire, or a position of heavenly enjoyment. We do not want to enjoy such material opulences, nor do we desire to achieve the yogic perfections, nor the exalted post of Lord Brahma, nor do we want any of the different kinds of liberation, sarupya, salokya, sharsti, samipya, or sayujya. We are not at all attracted by any of these opulences. Our only ambition is to bear on our heads, life after life, the dust particles attached to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. The goddess of fortune also desires to keep that dust on her breasts, along with fragrant saffron. We simply desire this dust, which accumulates underneath the lotus feet of Krishna as he travels on the land of Vrindavan as a cowherd boy. The gopis especially, and also the cowherd men and the aborigine tribeswomen, always desire to become the grass and straw on the streets of Vrindavan, to be trampled on by the lotus feet of Krishna. My dear Queen, we wish to remain as such, life after life, without any other desire. I'll just take a break to take a drink, and then we'll go on to the next chapter. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 83rd chapter of Krishna. Draupadi meets the queens of Krishna. Chapter 84. Sacrificial ceremonies performed by Vasudeva. Among the women present at Kurukshetra during the solar eclipse, Kunti, Gandhari, Draupadi, Subhadra, and the queens of many other kings, as well as the gopis from Vrindavan. When the different queens of Lord Krishna were submitting their statements as to how they had been married and accepted Lord Krishna as his wives, all the female members of the Kuru dynasty were struck with wonder. They were filled with admiration at how all the queens of Krishna were attached to him with love and affection. When they heard about the queen's intensity of love and affection for Krishna, they could not check their eyes from filling with tears. While the women were engaged in conversations among themselves, and the men were similarly engaged in conversation, there arrived from all directions almost all the important sages and ascetics who had come for the purpose of seeing Lord Krishna and Balaram. Chief among the sages were Krishna Dvaipayana Vyas, the great sage Narada, Chaivana, Devala, Asita, Vishwamrita, Shatananda, Bharadwaj, Gautama, Lord Parashuram, along with his disciples, Vashishta, Galab, Bhrigu, Pulastya, Kashyapa, Atri, Markandeya, Brihaspati, Dvita, Trita, Ekata, the four Kumaras, sons of Brahma, Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumara, Angira, Agastya, Yajnavalkya, and Vamadev. That's not Vamadev. Vamadev is a great sage. As soon as the sages and ascetics arrived, all the kings, including Maharaj Yudhishthira and the other Pandavas, and Lord Krishna and Balaram, immediately got up from their seats and offered respects by bowing down to the universally respected sages. After this, the sages were properly welcomed by being offered seats and water for washing their feet. Palatable fruits, garlands, flowers, incense, and sandalwood pulp were presented, and all the kings, led by Krishna and Balaram, worshipped the sages according to the Vedic rules and regulations. When all the sages were comfortably seated, Lord Krishna, who descended for the protection of religion, began to address them on behalf of all the kings. When the Krishna began to speak, all became silent, being eager to hear and understand his welcoming words to the sages. Lord Krishna spoke thus: "All glories to the assembled sages and ascetics. Today we all feel that our lives have become successful. Today we have achieved the desired goal of life because now we see face to face all the exalted, liberated sages and ascetics, whom even the great demigods in the heavens desire to see. Persons who are neophytes in devotional service and who simply offer their respectful obeisances to the deity in the temple, but cannot realize that the Lord is situated in everyone's heart, and those who simply worship different demigods for fulfillment of their own lusty desires, are unable to understand the importance of these sages. They cannot take advantage of receiving these sages by seeing them with their eyes, by touching their lotus feet, by inquiring about their welfare, or by diligently worshipping them. Neophyte devotees or religionists cannot understand the importance of great Mahatmas. They go to the temple as a matter of formality and pay their respectful obeisances to the deity. But when one is promoted to the next platform of transcendental consciousness, one can understand the importance of Mahatmas and devotees. And at that stage, one tries to please them. Therefore, Lord Krishna said that the neophytes cannot understand the importance of great sages, devotees, or ascetics. Lord Krishna continued, "One cannot purify himself merely by traveling to holy places of pilgrimage, taking a bath there, or by seeing the demigods' forms in the temples. But if one happens to meet a great devotee, a Mahatma, who is representative of the Supreme of the Personality of Godhead, one is immediately purified. To become purified, one is enjoined to worship the fire, the sun, the moon, the earth, the water, the air, the sky, and the mind. By worshipping all the elements and their predominating deities, one can gradually become free from the influence of envy, but all the sins of an envious person can be nullified immediately simply by serving a great soul." It's a verse you quoted last night. My dear revered sages and respectable kings, you can take it from me that a person who accepts the material body made of three elements, mucus, bile, and air, as his own self, who considers his family and relatives his own, who accepts material things as worshipable, or who visits great holy places of pilgrimage just to take a bath there, but never associates with great personalities, sages, and Mahatmas. Such a person, even though in the form of a human being, is nothing but an animal, like an ass. When the Supreme Authority, Lord Krishna, was thus speaking with great gravity, all the sages and ascetics remained in dead silence. They were amazed upon hearing him speak the absolute philosophy of life in such a concise way. I mean, when I read this, just recently, I just passed this part. And I thought of Prabhupada. How Prabhupada said everything, said deepest things in such clear, simple language. Not a lot of flowery, not a leaving Sanskrit in that can't be translated so that everyone has to go to them to learn what it is. He was freely giving everything in the most simple language. And his translations of the most elevated prayers and discussions and descriptions in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam about the intimate feelings between Krishna and the gopis and one another. They're so profound. The Antya-lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita, when you hear those things through the lips of Chaitanya, translated by Prabhupada, you get the real thing. You get the real thing. You guys should stay in Brahmacharya Ashram until you've read all those books. Why are we morose? Why are we bewildered? Why are we confused at every little thing? Every little breeze that goes by, every skirt that blows in the wind that walks by. Because we're not thinking of Krishna in love. We're not making that the goal. It means our material desires are too strong. Therefore, we must learn to give up those material desires. But we can't just give them up, especially in the unified stage. We have to transfer our affection to these books. What is it, the Gita? In the 17th chapter, 16th verse? Get me the Gita. I'm sorry I'm stealing the show. I'm sorry I should be letting you all talk to me, but
15th chapter?
I'm on a roll.
17th,
17th chapter. Open your ears. Focus into your mind. Put your mind on hold. Mana prasada samyadvam maunam atma vinigraha bhava sanshuddha et eta tapo manasam uchyate. And satisfaction, simplicity, gravity, self-control, and purification of one's existence are the austerities of the mind. Purport. To make the mind austere is to detach it from sense gratification. It should be so trained that it can be always thinking of doing good for others. The best training for the mind is gravity in thought. One should not deviate from Krishna consciousness and must always avoid sense gratification. To purify one's nature is to become Krishna conscious. Satisfaction of the mind can be obtained only by taking the mind away from thoughts of sense enjoyment. The more we think of sense enjoyment, the more the mind becomes dissatisfied. In the present age, we unnecessarily engage the mind in so many different ways for sense gratification. And so there is no possibility of the mind becoming satisfied. The best course is to divert the mind to the Vedic literature, which is full of satisfying stories, as in the Puranas and the Mahabharata. One can take advantage of this knowledge and thus become purified. The mind should be devoid of duplicity and should think of the welfare of all.
Welfare.
Silence means the welfare of all. Silence means that one is always thinking of self-realization. The person in Krishna consciousness observes perfect silence in this way, in this sense. Control of the mind means detaching the mind from sense enjoyment. One should be straightforward in his dealings and thereby purifies existence. All these qualities together constitute austerity in mental activity. I mean, how beautiful is that? How succinct, how poetic, how eloquent. And all we have to do is accept it without doubting, without arguments, without... That's all. That's what Krishna consciousness is. Everybody's always coming up, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I stop this? How do I stop that? It's right here. Just do it. There was a famous sports hero or somebody said, just do it. The more you think of doing something else, that's when that duality comes in, and we become agitated, and we become confused, and we lose all sense of joy and peacefulness and satisfaction. Therefore, satisfaction is considered to be an austerity. How can satisfaction be an austerity? Isn't austerity something you voluntarily take some inconvenience or trouble in order to get some future, some better thing or some better place or better whatever? They were amazed upon hearing him speak the absolute philosophy of life in such a concise way. Unless one is very much advanced in knowledge, one thinks his body to be his self, his family members to be his own, and the land of his birth to be worshipable. From this concept of life, the modern ideology of nationalism has sprung up. Lord Krishna condemned such ideas, and he also condemned persons who who take the trouble to go to holy places of pilgrimage just to take a bath and come back without taking the opportunity to associate with the great devotees and Mahatmas living there. Such persons are compared to the most foolish animal, the ass. All those who heard considered the speech of Lord Krishna for some time, and they concluded that Lord Krishna was actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, playing the role of an ordinary human being who was forced to take a certain type of body as a result of the reactions of his past deeds. He was assuming this pastime as an ordinary human being to teach the people in general how they should live for perfection of the human mission. Having concluded that that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sages addressed him thus: Dear Lord, we, the leaders of human society, are supposed to possess the proper philosophy of life. Yet we are bewildered by the spell of your external energy. We are surprised to see your behavior, which is just like that of an ordinary human being, and which conceals your real identity as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we therefore consider your pastimes to be all wonderful. Our dear Lord, by your energy, you create, maintain, and annihilate the whole cosmic manifestation of different names and forms, in the same way that the earth creates many forms of stone, trees, and other varieties of names and forms, and yet remains the same. Although you create varieties of manifestations through your energy, you are unaffected by all those actions. Our dear Lord, we are simply stunned to see your wonderful acts. Although you are transcendental to this entire material creation and are the Supreme Lord and the super soul of all living entities, you appear on this earth by your internal potency to protect your devotees and destroy the miscreants. By such an appearance, you re-establish the principles of eternal religion, which human society forgets by long association with the material energy. Our dear Lord, you are the creator of the social orders and spiritual statuses of human society according to quality and work. And when these orders are misguided by unscrupulous persons, you appear and set them right. Dear Lord, the Vedic knowledge is the representation of your pure hearts. Repeat that. Dear Lord, the Vedic knowledge is the representation of your pure heart. Austerity, study of the Vedas, and meditative trances lead to different realizations of yourself in the manifested and non-manifested aspects. The entire phenomenal world is a manifestation of your impersonal energy, but you yourself, as the original personality of Godhead, are not manifested there. You are the Supreme Soul, the Supreme Brahman. Persons who are situated in Brahminical culture therefore can understand the truth about your transcendental form. Thus you always hold the Brahmanas in respect, and you are considered to be the topmost of all followers of Brahminical culture. You are therefore known as Brahmanya Deva. Our dear Lord, you are the last word in good fortune and the last resort of all saintly persons. Therefore we all consider that you have achieved the perfection of our life, education, austerity, and acquisition of transcendental knowledge by meeting you. Factually, you are the ultimate goal of all transcendental achievements. Our Lord, there is no end to your unlimited knowledge. Your form is transcendental, eternally existing in full bliss and knowledge. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Soul. Being covered by the spell of your internal potency, Yogamaya, you are now temporarily concealing your unlimited potencies, but still we can understand your exalted position, and therefore all of us offer you our respectful obeisances. Dear Lord, you are enjoying your pastimes in the role of a human being, concealing your real character of transcendental opulence. Therefore, none of the kings present here, even the members of the Yadu dynasty, who constantly mingle with you, eat with you, and sit with you, can understand that you are the original cause of all causes, the soul of everyone, the origin, the original cause of all creation. When a person dreams at night, hallucinatory figures created by the dream are accepted as real. And the imaginary dream body is accepted as one's real body. For the time being, one forgets that besides the body created in hallucination, there is another, real body in his awakened state. Similarly, in the awakened state also, the bewildered conditioned soul considers sense enjoyment to be real happiness. By the process of enjoying the senses of the material body, the spirit soul is covered, and its consciousness becomes materially contaminated. It is due to material consciousness that one cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. All great mystic yogis endeavor to revive their Krishna consciousness by mature practice of the yoga system just to understand your lotus feet. They meditate upon your transcendental form to counteract their accumulated sinful reactions. It is said that the water of the Ganges can vanquish volumes of a person's sinful reactions. But the Ganges water is glorious only due to your lotus feet. The Ganges water flows as perspiration from the lotus feet of your Lordship. And we are all so fortunate that today we have been able to see your lotus feet directly. Please be kind and bestow your causeless mercy upon us. We know well that persons who have become liberated by constant engagement in your devotional service are no longer contaminated by the material modes of nature. Thus they have become eligible to be promoted to the kingdom of God in the spiritual world. After first offering prayers to Lord Krishna, the assembled sages wanted to take permission from King Dhritarashtra and King Yudhishthira, and then depart for their respective ashrams. At that time, however, Vasudeva, the father of Lord Krishna, and the most celebrated of all pious men, approached the sages and with great humility offered his respects by falling down at their feet. Vasudeva said, "My dear great sages, you are more respected than the demigods. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I wish for you to accept my one request. If you so desire, I shall consider it a great blessing if you kindly explain the supreme fruitive activity by which one can counteract reactions of all other activities." This may be a pretty important thing that's happening here. The great sage Narada was the leader of all the sages present. Therefore he began to speak. "My dear sages," he said, "it is not very difficult to understand that because of his great goodness, it is not very difficult to understand that because of his great goodness and simplicity, Vasudeva, who has become the father of the personality of Godhead by accepting Krishna as his son, is inclined to ask us about his welfare. It is said that familiarity breeds contempt. As such, Vasudeva, having Krishna as his son, does not regard Krishna with awe and veneration. Sometimes it is seen that persons living on the bank of the Ganges do not consider the Ganges very important, and they go far away to take their baths at a place of pilgrimage on the Ganges. There is no need for Vasudeva to ask us for instruction when Lord Krishna is personally present, because his knowledge is never second in any circumstance. His knowledge is not affected by the process of creation, maintenance, and annihilation, nor is it ever influenced by any agency beyond himself, nor is it agitated by the interaction of the material qualities or changed in the course of time. His transcendental form is full of knowledge, which never becomes agitated by ignorance, pride, attachment, envy, or sense enjoyment. His knowledge is never subject to the laws of karma regarding pious or impious activities, nor is it influenced by the three modes of material nature. No one is greater than or equal to him, because he is the supreme authority, the personality of Godhead. The ordinary conditioned human being may think that the conditioned soul who is covered by his materialistic senses, mind, and intelligence is equal to Krishna. But Lord Krishna is just like the sun, which although it sometimes may appear to be so, is never covered by the cloud, snow, or fog, or by other planets during an eclipse. There it is. We got the knowledge of what just happened, and people are worshiping. Everyone goes to see it. Oh, look at that! And what's happening? They're just going in darkness and worshiping the darkness, actually. When the eyes of less intelligent men are covered by such influences, they think the sun to be invisible. And they take pleasure, that's my edit, I'm sorry, that's my point. And they take pleasure in it. But we're asked by the scriptures to stay inside, you know, just chant here, don't go out there and look at it. The President of the United States of America right now was standing on the balcony, and his people who take care of him yelled up to him, "Don't look at it, don't look." And he went, "Yeah," and he looked. Yeah. It's in the news, you can read it. When the eyes of less intelligent men are covered by such influences, they think the sun to be invisible. Similarly, persons who are influenced by senses addicted to material enjoyment cannot have a clear vision of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The sages present then began to address Vasudeva in the presence of Lord Krishna, Balaram, and many other kings. And as requested by him, they gave their instructions. To counteract the reactions of fruitive activities and the desires impelling one to fruitive activities, one must with faith and devotion execute the prescribed sacrifices meant for worshipping Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu is the beneficiary of the results of all sacrificial performances. Great personalities and sages who are able to see everything clearly through the eyes of the revealed scriptures and possess vision of the three phases of the time element, namely past, present, and future, have unanimously recommended that to purify the dust of material contamination accumulated in the heart and to clear the path of liberation, and thereby achieve transcendental bliss, one must please Lord Vishnu. For everyone living as a householder in one of the higher social orders, Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, this worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, who is known as Purushottama, the original person, is recommended as the only auspicious path. So how auspicious is the path of Nam Sankirtan to the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna? And we're doing it. How is it possible not to be happy?
We have an ecstatic kirtan today.
I know, but how is it possible for us not to be happy?
Oh. Yeah.
Or confused? Or wonder about anything?
Offenses to the holy name.
Now he's going to explain. Now he's going to explain why, how that is. All conditioned souls within this material world have deep-rooted desires to lord it over the resources of material nature. Everyone wants to accumulate riches. Everyone wants to enjoy life to the greatest extent. Everyone wants a wife, home, and children. And everyone wants to become happy in this world and be elevated to the heavenly planets in the next life. To do more of the same. Excuse me. But these desires are the causes of one's material bondage. Therefore, to get liberation from this bondage, one has to sacrifice his honestly earned riches for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu. The only process to counteract all sorts of material desires is to engage oneself in the devotional service of Lord Vishnu. In this way, a self-controlled person, even while remaining in householder life, should give up the three kinds of material desires, namely, the desire for the acquisition of material opulence, for the enjoyment of wife and children, and for elevation to heavenly planets. Eventually, he should give up householder life and accept the renounced order, engaging himself completely in the devotional service of the Lord. Everyone, even if born in a higher status as a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, is certainly indebted to the demigods, to the sages, to the forefathers, and to other living entities. And in order to liquidate all these debts, one has to perform sacrifices, study the Vedic literature, and generate children in religious household or life. If somehow one accepts the renounced order of life without liquidating these debts, he certainly falls down from his position. Now, by performing sacrifices, you can free yourself from indebtedness to the demigod, and thus take complete shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My dear Vasudeva, certainly you have already performed many pious activities in your previous lives. Otherwise, how could you be the father of Krishna and Balaram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Saintly Vasudeva, after hearing all the sages, offered his respectful obeisances under their lotus feet. In this way he pleased the sages, and then he requested them to perform the yajnas. When the sages were selected as the priests of the sacrifice, they in turn induced Vasudeva to collect the required paraphernalia for executing the yajnas in that place of pilgrimage. When Vasudeva was thus persuaded to start to perform the yajnas, all the members of the Yadu dynasty took their baths, dressed themselves very nicely, decorated themselves beautifully, and garlanded themselves with lotus flowers. Vasudeva's wives, dressed with nice garments and ornaments and golden necklaces, approached the arena of sacrifice, carrying in their hands the required articles to offer in the sacrifice. When everything was complete, there was heard the vibration of mridangas, conch shells, kettle drums, and other musical instruments. Professional dancers, both male and female, began to dance. The sutas and magadas, who were professional singers, began to offer prayers by singing. And the Gandharvas and their wives, whose voices were very sweet, began to sing many auspicious songs. Vasudeva anointed his eyes with black cosmetic, smeared butter over his body, and thus along with his 18 wives, headed by Devaki, sat before the priest to be purified by the Abhishek ceremony. While the ceremony was being observed strictly according to the principles of the scriptures, Vasudeva resembled the moon encircled by stars. Because he was being initiated for the sacrifice, he was dressed in a deerskin, but all his wives were dressed in very nice saris, bangles, necklaces, ankle bells, earrings, and many other ornaments. Vasudeva looked very beautiful, surrounded by his wives, exactly like the King of Heaven when he performed such a sacrifice. At that time, when Lord Krishna and Balaram, along with their wives, children, and relatives, sat down in that great sacrificial arena, it appeared that the Supreme Personality of Godhead was present with all the living entities and multi-energies that are part of Him. We have heard from the Shastras that Lord Krishna has multi-energies and parts and parcels, but now in that sacrificial arena, all could actually experience how the Supreme Personality of Godhead eternally exists with His different energies. At that time, Lord Krishna appeared as Lord Narayan, and Lord Balaram appeared as Sankarshan, the reservoir of all living entities. Vasudeva satisfied Lord Vishnu by performing different kinds of sacrifices, such as Jyotishtama and Darsha Purnamasa. Some of these yajnas are called Prakrita, and some of them are known as Shaurya, Satra, or Vaikrita. Thereafter, the other sacrifices, known as Agnihotra, were also performed, and the prescribed articles were offered in the proper way. Thus Lord Vishnu was pleased. The ultimate purpose of offering oblations in sacrifice is to please Lord Vishnu. But in this age of Kali, it is very difficult to collect the different articles required for offering sacrifice. People have neither the means to collect the required paraphernalia, nor the necessary knowledge or tendency to offer such sacrifice. Therefore, in this age of Kali, when people are most unfortunate, full of anxieties, and disturbed by various kinds of calamities, the only sacrifice recommended is the performance of the Sankirtan Yajna. Worshipping Lord Chaitanya by the Sankirtan Yajna is the only recommended process in this age. After the performance of the different sacrifices, Vasudeva offered ample riches, clothing, ornaments, cows, land, and maidservants to the priests. Thereafter, all the wives of Vasudeva took their avavrita baths and performed the part of the sacrificial duties known as Patni Samyaja. After finishing the offerings, the offering with all the required paraphernalia. They all took their baths together in the lakes constructed by Parshuram, which are known as the Rama Radha. After Vasudeva and his wives took their baths, all the garments and ornaments they had worn were distributed to the subordinate persons engaged in singing, dancing, and similar activities. We may note that the performance of sacrifice necessitates the profuse distribution of riches. Charity is offered to the priests and the brahmanas in the beginning, and used garments and ornaments are offered in charity to the subordinate assistants after the performance of sacrifice. After offering the new articles to the singers and reciters, Vasudeva and his wives dressed with new ornaments and garments, fed everyone very sumptuously, from the brahmanas down to the dogs. After this, all the friends, family members, wives, and children of Vasudeva assembled together, along with all the kings and members of the Vidarbha, Koshala, Kuru, Kashi, Kekaya, and Sinjaya dynasties. The priests, the demigods, the people in general, the forefathers, the ghosts, and the charanas were all sufficiently remunerated by being offered ample gifts and respectful honor. Then all the persons assembled there took permission from Lord Krishna, the husband of the goddess of fortune, and while glorifying the perfection of the sacrifice made by Vasudeva, they departed to their respective homes. At that time, when King Dhritarashtra, Vidura, Yudhishthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Bhishmadev, Dronacharya, Kunti, Nakula, Sahadev, Narada, Lord Vyasadeva, and many other relatives and kinsmen were about to depart, they felt separation, and therefore embraced each other, and every member of the Yadav dynasty, with great feeling. Many others who were assembled in that sacrificial arena also departed. After this, Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram, along with King Ugrasena, satisfied the inhabitants of Vrindavan, headed by Maharaj Nanda and the cowherd men, by profusely offering all kinds of gifts to worship them and please them. Out of the great feelings of friendship, the inhabitants of Vrindavan remained there for a considerable time with the members of the Yadu dynasty. After performing this sacrifice, Vasudeva felt so satisfied that there was no limit to his happiness. All the members of his family were with him, and in their presence, he caught hold of the hands of Nanda Maharaj and addressed him thus: "My dear brother, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has created a great tie of bondage, known as the bondage of love and affection. I think that it is a very difficult job for even the great sages and saintly persons to cut such a tie of love. My dear brother, you have exhibited feelings of love for me that I was not able to return. I think therefore that I am ungrateful. You have behaved exactly as is characteristic of saintly persons, but I shall never be able to repay you. I have no means to repay you for your friendly dealings. Nevertheless, I am confident that our tie of love will never break. Our friendship must ever continue, in spite of my inability to repay you. I hope you will excuse me for this inability. My dear brother, in the beginning, due to my being imprisoned, I could never serve you as a friend, and although at the present moment I am very opulent, because of my material prosperity, I have become blind. I therefore cannot satisfy you properly even at this time. My dear brother, you are so nice and gentle that you offer all respect to others, but don't care for any respect for yourself. A person seeking auspicious progress in life must avoid possessing too much material opulence so that he will not become blind and puffed up, and he should take care of his friends and relatives. When Vasudeva was speaking to Nanda Maharaj in this way, he was influenced by a great feeling for the friendship of Nanda Maharaj and the beneficial activities executed by King Nanda on his behalf. As such, his eyes filled with tears, and he began to cry. Nanda Maharaj, desiring to please his friend Vasudeva, and being affectionately bound with love for Lord Krishna and Balaram, passed 3 months in their association. the end of this time, all the members of the outer dynasty tried to please the inhabitants of Vrindavan to their heart's content. The members of the outer dynasty tried to satisfy Nanda Maharaj and his associates by offering them clothing, ornaments, and many other valuable articles, and they all became fully satisfied. Ugrasena, Vasudeva Ugrasena, Lord Krishna, Lord Balaram, Uddhava, and all other members of the outer dynasty presented their individual gifts to Nanda Maharaj and his associates. After Nanda Maharaj received all these farewell presentations, he, along with his associates, started for Vrajabhumi, Vrindavan. The minds of the inhabitants of Vrindavan remained, however, with Krishna and Balaram, and therefore all of them started for Vrindavan without their minds. When the members of the Vishnu dynasty saw all their friends and visitors departing, they observed that the rainy season was approaching, and thus they decided to return to Dwarka. They were fully satisfied, for they regarded Krishna as everything. When they returned to Dwarka, they described with great satisfaction the sacrifice performed by Vasudeva, their meeting with various friends and well-wishers, and various other incidents that had occurred during their travels to the places of pilgrimage. Thus ended Bhaktivedanta purport of the 84th chapter of Krishna, sacrificial ceremonies performed by Vasudeva.
Alright.
Hare Krishna.
I feel like my life is successful now. I can say it. I mean, just the whole universe is present in this story.
Yes.
Like everybody in the
Yes.
whole universe.
Yes.
All classes of beings.
Yes.
All great personalities.
Yes. And therefore,
Amazing.
because now we can't do that kind of sacrifice where everybody can participate in that way, Lord Chaitanya came to give us this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and the Srimad Bhagavatam. We must do both simultaneously, and then we'll become fully satisfied. Actually, if you think about it deeply, when we take initiation, and Prabhupada gave this standard, 16 rounds, the 4 regular regs, that's enough for now to purify us so that we can chant without offense. And it was japa, it wasn't non-sanctified congregation. Those are the only 2 things he asked us to do for initiation. Therefore, those are the most important things, without a doubt. But from that, doing that, then we get the purified heart. Then we can hear the Bhagavatam. Then we can understand all these things. Then we can understand how to treat one another according to our relationships. And how we have to treat all living entities. So we get the same result as this Maha Yajna. So we shouldn't mistake these activities as, just fun or having we have complete fun. But it's so profound. It's not just a party. I mean, they all came together to have a party. It was, how deep was it? The satisfaction of the soul, satisfaction of the mind and intelligence. Anyway, so reflections. Wow, it's 9 o'clock. Just like that. Yes.
Just like coming in the mood of how they're like.
Now speak up a little louder.
I just like the mood of how all the residents like interact with Krishna and it's so like deep and like reverential, I think.
Come on. Keep going.
They
Because they're doing everything for the pleasure of Krishna, and therefore for the pleasure of one another, without any thought of themselves. And therefore they become completely satisfied, completely happy. Yes.
I was appreciating in first chapter when I don't remember. I'm just going to paraphrase, or at least what I took from it was that when you're establishing a relationship with Krishna, it's effectively priceless because he'll start fulfilling your desires within those moody commandments. It's not a material thing that you're having there.
Correct. So, it seems to me, stop me if I'm wrong, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that this is the goal of life. And therefore, you're satisfied when there's nothing else to go to.
Well, like all the queens, when we were talking about,
Oh,
it kind of reminds me, a lot of times when you sit around with devotees, you talk about, like, how did you become a devotee? How did you become a
yes,
devotee?
yes,
Sort of like, how did Krishna,
yes,
make you, his wife?
yes,
It was really,
yes,
but that's the ultimate.
yes,
Like, this is like when you actually join Krishna's pastimes in person,
yes,
it's like the ultimate, how did you become a Hare Krishna
yes.
devotee, I have a bunch of things I want to say. There was another thing, there's a bunch of Gita verses that just constantly, so, Machita Madgata Prana, it's in the 4 nutshell verses of the Gita, and the pure devotees constantly talk about me, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss, but they're always talking about me.
That's right.
And even they're in the presence of Lord Krishna, and they're huddled up together talking about him
Yes,
in different groups,
yes,
and so I thought that was interesting.
yes,
Something about what Bhakti said is how in the state of samadhi,
yes,
or trance, one is, one of the comments is that one realizes that there's nothing better than this.
no greater gain.
There's no greater gain. That's what you said. Yeah. There's no greater gain.
And
So-
therefore one is undisturbed even amongst the
The,
most difficult situations.
so yeah, this is like samadhi. These devotees are completely absorbed. They can't think of anything. They can't even think about anything else.
Yes,
And what do they stay for 3 months saying goodbye?
yeah,
The original long goodbye. Yeah, that's some of my thoughts.
absolutely fantastic. I hope that got in the,
It's all
huh? Got it?
I have one other question.
Yes,
Well, I have a
please.
couple, but I can go on forever. One is, the sages, when they're appreciating Krishna, it seems like there's a lot of different relationships happening in this one setting. There's the fraternal affection of the parents of Krishna, and then there's the queens, and then there's the gopis, and they have, conjugal in different ways. And then there's the sages, and I've heard Prabhupada say sometimes if you have great appreciation for Krishna, then that's Shantagras, and that could lead to dasya. So I was wondering, like, when the sages initially started glorifying Krishna's statements, it sounded like a broad kind of appreciation. Was there some Shantarasas in this
Yes,
room
there's
here,
all,
or
yes, but it's elevated.
is it?
It's elevated to another platform by the association of all the residents and the associates of Krishna. That's why they became bewildered when Krishna was talking. Because just like when Parikshit Maharaj, before Shukadev Goswami came onto the scene, they were all giving him different advice on what he should do now at the time of death. And they didn't all agree, and therefore he didn't know exactly what he was to do. But as soon as Shukadev Goswami came on the scene, just by seeing him, because they all knew physiognomy, just by seeing his body, they went, oh, and they all bowed down, except for his father and Narda and Shiva or somebody like that. Everybody else bowed down, and they said, okay, you take a seat and tell us, you know. Just like Balaram when he went on pilgrimage, he didn't want to get involved in battle of Kurukshetra because he had this affection for Duryodhana because he taught him how to fight from the club and everything. So he came upon the Naimisharanya, the sages, and they were performing that sacrifice. And it was time for Sutta Goswami he had already been, his Ramaharsha, it came time for Ramaharsha to come to the point of the Puranas and Bhagavatam eventually. And then, but when Balaram came, he didn't stand up. I mean, the actual rule technically is he didn't need to stand up. But because Balaram's God, you got to stand up. And he didn't. Therefore he said, wait a second, this guy doesn't belong on the seat. He just took a kushka and boom, and he was dead. So Sutta Goswami was destined. Why? Because he was present. He was present when Parikshit Maharaj heard Bhagavatam. And he had exceptionally good memory. And he was qualified because he knew all the Puranas. And they're more important for this age. So therefore, Balaram, put him on the seat. He was put on the seat directly by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's interesting. Gopi Purandaran Prabhu, he really brings out this point nicely in his lectures and in his approach to the Bhagavatam. Because he studied the Sandarbhas very carefully. He was translated. He knew them. And Jiva Goswami says that the Bhagavatam is actually eternal. They don't have an author. Vyasadeva is not the author. He brought it out of, into the external world in Kali Yuga. But it's eternal. And not a word is changed. In other words, he repeated. When Vyasadeva chose him, Shukadev, to be the knower he was the knower. Vidashta sarva mahame vedya vedanta krit veda vid evan chaha. So the Vedanta means Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta krit. He wrote this is all talking about Vyasadeva.
Right.
And he's the knower of the Vedas. So therefore, when he got his instruction from Narada Muni, why he was feeling despondent, what was the insufficiency in him that needed to be corrected, then he told him, you need to write a book that's just about Krishna, because you told about everything, including Krishna, but you mixed it with so many other things. The common people in the age of Kali, they will get the wrong idea. Therefore, you're feeling dissatisfied. So he went into trance. It's described in the Bhagavatam. He went into trance. And he saw Krishna, he saw the illusory energy, he saw the soul. And then he brought it into the world. So he did, and when Sutta Goswami, and in that Bhagavatam that's eternal, Sutta Goswami was in that Bhagavatam.
Okay, so now this brings up a question, because there's Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam, which is where the Lord speaks to Lord Brahma in 4 verses. So, to our vision, it seems like Bhagavatam is 18,000 verses, and that's 4 verses. And you said there's not a word changed that boggles the mind.
Because that's not the Bhagavatam. That's not the full Bhagavatam. Or you could say that the Bhagavatam is contained within those 4 verses.
Okay.
But you can't hear them. You can't penetrate them. You could say that.
Because it's so densely packed.
Yeah.
Only Lord Brahma could
Yeah.
unpack it, sort of.
Yeah. It's like Om, Omkara. That Om is at the beginning of every Vedic mantra. They proceed from that sound vibration.
Right.
That sound vibration is Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Starts like that. And everything proceeds from that. Unpacking Krishna. Explaining that first verse. So anyway, the point I was making was that it's already planned out. You know, every creation unfolds according to the hymns of the Vedas. The way of the unfolding of the universe is encoded within the hymns of the Vedas. They're co-eternal with Krishna. Karma brahmodbhavam vedi, brahmakshara samudbhavam, tasmat sarvagatam brahma, nityam jagye pratishtha. Where's the Gita? This is the verse in the Gita explains this. Karma brahmodbhavan vidi, ramakshara samudbhavam, tasmat sarvagatam brahma, nityam jaggi pratishthitam. Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. So that word there, Nityam, it connects all those thoughts. It's the word in that verse that connects all those thoughts together.
So that is, you're saying, you're underscoring that Vedas are co-eternal with
Yes.
the Lord.
Yeah, and therefore, this forms of sacrifice, everything's coming within it. The transcendence is there, contained in those
So
activities.
I had a question that relates to sacrifice, which is, in our culture, speaking for myself, I was sort of born in a semi-irreligious environment. Very irreligious, but, what happened to the concept of sacrifice, and how was it historically destroyed, or what?
It wasn't. It's eternal.
No, but in our culture right now, what would
It's covered.
what would sacrifice?
It's covered
look
by
like?
it's covered by the son, the father and the mother taking care of the child,
Okay.
sacrificing the mother's sacrifice. Therefore,
Okay.
it's Prabhupada used to say that the love for the mother and the son is the closest thing to God, the love of God.
Okay. But actually,
When
Yeah, okay.
eternal means that
Right.
anything we do, I mean, this is not on the same level as this, but it's in principle, it's the same.
Alright.
We can't be satisfied without that. Sarve pyete jagivido, yagya chapita kalmashaha, yagya shist amrita bhujo, yanti brahma sanatana. That's from the 4th chapter. It comes after all those verses which describe all the different kinds of sacrifice that people do. And the householders, they sacrifice the objects of the senses in the senses. And the sages, they study the Vedas or stop breathing, whatever, sacrifice their breath. Let me see. 4th chapter. Sarve pyete jagivido. Yeah. Sarve pyete jagivido. Yagya chapta kalmashaha. Yagya shist amrita bhujo. Amrita bhujo. Nectar, sacrifice. Yanti brahma sanatana. All these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reactions and having tasted the nectar of the results of sacrifices, they advance toward the supreme eternal atmosphere. So, of course, it's what I'm saying is a little bit extrapolated from that, but it means that when you do something for another person, sacrifice your time, your energy, your thought, for another person, you get a satisfaction from it. It's different from the satisfaction you get from anything else.
So that's kind of a glimmer
Yes.
of the real taste of
Yes,
of
and
sacrifice. for the
therefore
Lord.
it propels them. It
Okay.
propels someone
Right.
forward.
Or like if somebody's like an Olympic athlete and they're
Yes.
trying to win a gold medal for their country, I mean that's kind of a example.
You imagine when you get the gold medal and you're up there and everybody's going, "Ooh, yeah!" and you're like,
Right.
You get some.
But that's like
Satisfaction
again, it's
is-
like a glimmer. It's not
Yeah.
serving Krishna, but it's kind of
No, but it's relative. It's
Yeah.
relative to
So-
the kinds of pleasure that
Yeah.
people have from doing other things. But they've made a big sacrifice.
right.
You don't get up there, in the Olympics and get the gold medal unless you've dedicated your whole life to it. I mean, maybe rarely, but generally you have to sacrifice everything. So it's a principle.
So these ideas of like people doing their roles, like a young boy going to college, he gets good grades and makes his parents proud, and that's kind of part of that, right? Sacrifice. All these
Yeah, it's a
different roles,
principle of
like-
sacrifice. It's
So-
the principles of sacrifice.
But what happened to the idea
Well,
of
but you're answering your own question.
no? But what
You're
happened?
you're answering your own question
Oh,
when you say, well, what about doing this and doing that? Because they're doing those
I
things
see.
instead of
I see.
doing these things.
I see.
Then they get the pleasure from sacrificing themselves, but they're covered over because it's for me. Therefore, where did we hear it in this? In our readings this last few days, oh yeah, I just read it. I just read it in the Gita. Doing things for the benefit of others.
Hmm.
Those things are for themselves to get up there and get the gold medal, but they
Right.
get a perverted reflection of it. That's the point you're making. Because
Okay.
they're doing something for their own personal aggrandizement, and the people who are, worshiping them
Mm.
by their clapping and their whatever, they get some buzz. It's a reflection. It's a perverted reflection. That's the modes of nature.
Hmm.
But it's all karma brahmo brahmambadi, It's not the same. It's not the same. It's a perverted reflection.
Oh.
But the principle is there that allows the reflection to look like the real thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
And even sometimes to feel like the real thing. But then, 10 minutes later, it's finished.
There's no more Ananda.
No more Ananda. It's not Ananda.
No more Amrita.
No more Amrita.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. So gentlemen, I just ran out of steam. I'm still recuperating from my thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the
Hare
reading.
Krishna.